Good morning. I calculate that this is probably our 21st breakfast, and some of you have been here before, some of you not, so we'll try to concentrate today on the results. And then, for those who haven't been here before, if you have more questions, of course, on the business model, we get a bit deeper into that. First of all, us. So this is Marc Lavelle, our COO. And he's been with us for a bit more than a year. And also he's going to be answering, I'm sure, a lot of your questions. And then Brad, you've seen him before if you've been. He's our CFO, and he's been with the company for 4 years. And I'm David Cicurel, by the way, for those who don't know, maybe you've probably guessed. So just a reminder of what we do. This is slide 2. We're doing a buy and build of scientific instruments companies. We think it's a particularly good model for 3 reasons. One is the long-term growth drivers, and I'll come on to that a bit later, what they are. There's a large pool of potential acquisitions, which are really small companies in global niches. And the companies we buy have very low working capital requirements. And these are really the 3 pillars of Judges, which really is buying companies, borrowing money, and because of the good cash conversion, repaying the bank and then doing it again. So that's repayment is one of the main creator of value in our mind. We've built up a good track record as acquirer, and people love to sell their company to us. Most of the people who sell these companies are people who retire. They love their company, but they want to change their lives. And they have never done a deal in their life, and they feel very reticent to go through that process. And we've acquired the reputation of being good, honest purchasers, who keep their word and who do the deal exactly as it's been agreed, and who will take good care of the companies after the deal. So this has really helped us do deals, and we are also very disciplined. We believe we have to buy companies when we're really confident that we're happy to own them for the long term. And we also need to pay disciplined prices, because that's one of the bases of the model. The model is very sensitive to the price we pay. So we have to pay enough, otherwise we'd never do a deal. But if we pay too much, it does corrupt the model. So on page 3, you have a bit of a history of all the years since we started as an instrument company in 2005. And as you see, it's very erratic. We have some years where we don't do any deals, and then we have some years where we do 1, 2, or even 4, which was 2016. So it's very erratic, and one of the reasons it's erratic is because we're disciplined. We could do a deal every 3 months if we wanted. But I think a lot of these deals we would regret. Below, there's a few examples of the clients we have. And it's a variety of clients. We deal with a lot of universities, some of the most prestigious and some less prestigious. We put here Oxford. But we also sell to industrial companies like L'Oreal, like Corning, who want to check their products. We sell to also a scientific research institution like the CERN. And of course, we put Wenzhou University, because we do a lot of business in China, and there's a lot of growth in China. So, and it's mostly university work there. And then we're very proud of the 5 Queen's Awards we've received. And the key messages for this year, which is 2018, we've had a record financial performance, and really all our metrics have gone up in the year. We'll get on to what they are. We've really been helped by currency, but it was also a lot of hard work. But currency's obviously been a tailwind for us since the referendum. And so we've had a good period. And actually we had a good period, we started a bit before, so it's not only that. This has enabled us to also reward our shareholders, whom we love, with a 25 increase in the total dividend. We have a policy of increase the dividend by no less than 10% a year, but in a good year, we push it. And in fact, we've had a 24% compound growth rate in dividends since we started. Because we didn't do any deal, which we regret. It's a bit frustrating, mostly for me because I'm the one who's looking for the deals. We've relied this year on organic growth, but also a drive towards operational excellence, which was mostly driven by Mark. So it was his first year, so it was very good. We've had a good market, so it was solid order intake. We've continued to invest a lot in R&D, which of course drives demand because we have products which are up to date and we always hope to beat competition when we have it. And of course, we continue to be very diversified in terms of geographies and market, which gives a measure of stability to our business. And we've had, we're very pleased, we've had a very good order intake in the first 10 weeks of the year. And we still have good exchange rates, but we're not sure it will continue for a long time. And then I'm passing on to Brad about the results for the year.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to take you through the key highlights from the past year. We've had a very good year. David's already mentioned revenues up 9% to 77.9 million, up from 71.4 million in 2017. This is fed through to operating profits, which are up 35% to 14.7 million. And that's also fed through to earnings per share of 183.4 pence, up from 131.9 pence in 2017. Underpinning this result has been consistently positive order intake. And really, we've had good momentum through more than the past 2.5 years. And I'll take you through a slide on this a little bit later about order intake. But the 5.5% organic revenue growth we've had was supported by 6.2% organic order intake. And we finished the year with an order book of more than 14 weeks, which gives us a solid platform with which to start 2019. The group's also got a strong track record of turning profit into cash, and we generated 15.7 million cash from operations. And this goes to fund, as David mentioned before, our growing dividend. It's up 25% this year to 40 pence. And we've now returned more than twice the original subscription price to original shareholders, which we think is fantastic. And at the same time, also helps reduce our debt. Now, we started 2018 with 8 million of net debt, and at the end of the year, we finished in a net cash position, 0.9 million net cash. So we have a strong balance sheet as we enter 2019 in this period of macro and political instability. So when you look at the overall highlights, though, it's been an excellent year for Judges, really, really strong performance, and we look forward to 2019. Moving on to performance. The 9% revenue growth that I mentioned was shared between the organic growth and also a full year contribution from our acquisition of Oxford Cryosystems in July 2017. On top of the revenue growth, we also had our businesses really controlling their costs very well despite the revenue growth. And so these two things married together helped drive the 35% increase in profits. And I've got a slide to just show you the evolution of that a little bit later. Moving on to tax. Our effective rate on adjusted earnings is 15% this year. It's up a little bit from 14.2% last year, really driven by the strong growth in profits, partially offset by the reduction in US tax rates and also the great benefits we do get from the UK's R&D tax credit system, which for businesses like ours that invest heavily in R&D and have less than 500 employees is a really excellent scheme. And then for those of you that are not so familiar with our P&L, we also have adjusting items which take you to the statutory result. And really within that is predominantly non-cash amortisation of intangible assets that we're forced to recognise when we acquire businesses. Supporting performance, as I mentioned before, is order intake, and really that's the bellwether of our business. So I just want to talk you through the graph that's on the right-hand side of the slide. There's 3 lines on it. There's a red line, a black line and a green line. The red line is our annual sales budget, and we set this every year as part of our annual budgeting process. The black line is the trailing 12 months of orders, and the green line is the last 4 months of orders annualised. What we're looking for is for the black line at the end of the year to be at least touching or above the red line, to ensure that we've had sufficient orders with which to satisfy the sales budget. And the green line, we're looking to hover around the black line so that we've got hopefully consistent order intake, although it's naturally a more jagged line because it's a shorter term measure and order intake is never completely smooth. So what happened in 2018? Well, you can see that for the large proportion of the year, the black line was actually above the red line, and the green line was hovering nicely around the red line as well. And this enabled us to drive the performance we had last year. Order intake, we've had really good momentum for more than the past 2.5 years. Enables us to finish 2018 with a strong order book, and as we enter 2019, the first 10 weeks of orders have been ahead of the same time last year. So it gives us a good start for 2019. A little bit more detail on revenue on slide 9. Now, we're a very, very high exporter of our products. More than 85% we export around the globe. And our organic growth this year was really driven through good performance in the UK, rest of Europe and North America. At the same time, rest of the world was a bit lower, and China was also a little bit weaker, but against a very, very strong comparative. And if you look on the right-hand side of the graph, you can see the regions, that whilst there's been a little bit of a change in origination of where we've generated our performance this year compared to last year, you can see that the orders and revenue remain quite consistent. Looking at profit in a little bit more detail, this slide really reconciles between 2017 2018 contribution, which is the profit from the businesses before central costs. 3 things to talk about on here. First, we've had really significant recovery in the business which previously had production issues. In the centre of the slide, you can see really, really positive organic growth from our businesses, and only a couple of our businesses being slightly behind where they were last year. And then lastly, towards the right-hand side, the column from the acquisition reflects the full year contribution of our July 17 acquisition of Oxford Cryosystems. It's a really strong picture, very pleasing performance of our group of companies. Moving on to balance sheet and cash flows. We've had strong cash generation this year, and you can see the effects of that, where, as I mentioned before, we started the year with 8 million of net debt, and we finished the year in a position of 0.9 million of net cash. We do have a defined benefit pension scheme. It is a small scheme, only 40 members, close to new members, close to new accrual, has been for many years, and the net pension liability reduced to 1.5 million, primarily due to discount rates increasing. David mentioned in the first slide, one of the key tenets for our group is the fact that we have low capital requirements, and you can see working capital is less than 10% of revenue. And in a year, this year, where we've grown profits by 35%, we haven't been required to invest in working capital at all, which of course means that we can turn more of our profits into cash. And you can see from the cash flows that's exactly the case. At 106% cash conversion this year, 100% last year. We do have high cash conversion rates historically, and it enables us to continue to focus on being able to support acquisitions, reducing our acquisition debt and funding increasing dividend returns. Moving on to slide 12, another key measure for us is return on total invested capital. Put simply, it's a function of the multiples we pay for the businesses we acquire. If you start on the left-hand side of the graph, when we first acquired FTT in 2005/6, starts around 20% because we paid close to 5 times for FTT. And now to improve ROTIC, what do you need to do? Well, you either need to improve financial performance and or also buy businesses at lower multiples. And you can see we've performed well over the years. There are a couple of dips in the middle of the graph. When we acquired GDS and Scientifica in 2012 and 2013, and we paid a multiple of 6 times. And you can see then when you make a large business acquisition at that sort of higher multiple, it has quite a significant impact on your return on capital. This year we've achieved ROTIC of 27.6%. That's up from 20% last year. So we continue to improve, but we're aiming in the medium term, our aspiration is for 30% return on capital. We've achieved it before, that's where we're aiming to get back to with the group constituted as it is. And we certainly see that as a target for us over the coming year or so. Moving on to slide 13. I think it's a useful slide just to show people a little bit of diversification around the group for a number of reasons. You can see from the revenue pie chart that no single company dominates our group. At the same time, each of those companies operates in a different scientific market, makes different scientific instruments, and so we're diversified by scientific application as well. And if you then look at the geographical pie, you also see that no single country or region overly dominates. So lastly, I'm just going to take you through financial history, and really this slide summarises some key statistics about the long-term success of our group. Revenues, profits and EPS have all grown strongly over the history of our group, and this year was no exception, with record revenue, record profit and record EPS. And we've also had 9.2% compound annual revenue growth for the last 11 years, which for a business whose business model is based on acquiring companies with sustainable profits and cash flows is a credible achievement. Dividends have also increased, David mentioned earlier, close to 25% compound annual growth of the dividend, and this year 25% increase, as I mentioned before, to 40 pence per share. And of course the key thing for us is to continue to focus on cash generation, and you can see the increasing critical mass of our cash generation enables us to focus on reducing debt and funding shareholder returns. And I shall pass you back to David.
Thank you, Brad. So I want to talk a bit about the business model, a bit more than I've done before, and mostly the growth drivers. What drives the growth of the company? The world we live in, which is scientific instruments, is made of a lot of different little segment and sub-segment, and a lot of them are really tiny global niches where you can have a very small company having quite a dominating position in its market. This is the thing which attracted me when I saw FTT, the first acquisition we did, which I have no knowledge of the instrument market before. And it was a company we bought for 3.7 million, and it dominated its sector, and the sector was made of an instrument people needed to comply with some standards. So it's about flammability, and you can't build a building or a plane or ship or a train without complying with these standards. So something you need, and you're the main supplier worldwide. It's really, and you can buy all this for 3.7 million. So this is the model for the company that we followed since then. We're looking for companies like this. And the other thing is the multitude of them. We had statistics when we started that there was 2,000 companies in our sector just in the UK. So there's a very large number of companies. And if you think that this typical company belongs to an engineer or a scientist who works with a big company, and at 40 he leaves and he builds his company, and then he's very successful because we only buy the successful ones, so it's not difficult to assume he's successful. And when he's 60, he's starting to think about retiring. I mean, not that 60 is old, early, but that's a different thing. It's his birthday. So typically people keep these companies 20 years, and if there's 2,000 companies just in the UK, should be 100 deals. And they're not all good, but those which are good are excellent, and we're trying to find them. I should explain that, how easy to get them when they're good. Well, you need a determined seller, and you need to have not too much competition in buying it. And we have very little competition for companies which make less than 1 million EBIT. And we have a lot of competition for companies making more than 1 million EBIT. And so we've had to pay higher multiples. And for the larger companies, we paid 5, 6, and 6 times. We bought only 3 of them out of 16 deals. The smaller companies, we paid between 3 and 5 times, and we haven't had a lot of competition buying them. So this is why we've done more small deals, and it works very well. So what are the drivers that I've talked about, which basically are we believe, secular drivers in our business. And there's two of them. One is a tremendous growth in university education throughout the world. And it's true even in developed countries. And think of the UK 25 years ago. Who went to uni? The rich and the geniuses. Who goes today? Everybody. So there's been enormous growth in the number of students. And if it's true in the UK, which is a very developed country, it's even more true of places like China, like India. Even in Africa, you have a complete explosion of university education. And of course, you know, unlike the UK, a lot of it is technical. They want people to have jobs, and they want people to be able to make product which they will export. And so there's a lot of technical education in the developing world, and they all need instruments. The other driver is the push for in the whole world for optimization of everything. Everything which is done today is optimized. And again, to take an example of what happened 25 years ago, if you had a son and he passed his driving test, you would buy him a 1.6 liter car. And you were sure he wouldn't have a big accident with that because it hardly moved. So what do you do 25 years later with a 1.6 liter car? A Formula One car. That's what they're allowed to have. They all have a 1.6 liter engine. So how did you transform that 1.6 liter engine into the beast, which is in a Formula One car? Everything there is optimized. And everything that people do is optimized. Industry and construction, in consumer products, everything is optimized. And you cannot optimize something you haven't measured. So optimizing means measurement and means instrument, and that's what we sell. So we believe that these two things are absolutely long-term trends, and for many decades we will not see the end of that. Our model is a sustainability model because of the multiples we pay for these companies and the fact that they have very high cash conversion. It's a no-brainer. If they're sustainable, we're going to quickly repay the bank and do the next deal. So you don't need growth. And we've been looking for sustainable companies. So how on earth do we get 9.2% compound organic growth for 11 years? That is not logical. These growth drivers are so strong that any excellent company in a sector where there's good growth drivers will have growth. And that's where the bulk of our growth trend comes from that. But of course, effort. Sorry, I just wanted to say, a lot of the effort is research and development. Because if you let your product get to the end of its life cycle, you're not going to have any growth at all. So we buy companies which are very conservative, and usually we push research and development. We have new products, and every time you have good new products, we're doing well. So then, acquisitions. I'm sorry that I can't report one for 2018. It's the price to pay to be disciplined, and so we pay it proudly. So what are we looking for in acquisition? We're looking for companies which are strong exporters. So why do they need to be strong exporters? Because our world is, completely global. People do not tend to buy an instrument because it's made in the country where they live. And the UK, it's a big country, but it's not a big part of the world. So companies which are not exporting a lot will tend to be local companies rather than global companies. We look for exporters, and we look for solid EBIT margin, because if you have a big margin, it means that you're not in a price battlefield. Okay, so that's what we like, and we think then that is more sustainable. So we want companies generating sustainable profit, cash flow. I've said before what we pay. We have a very supportive bank. The relationship with a bank, which I've had a relationship with this bank for 29 years, but they've been incredibly supportive in the early days, and they still are, but it's easier for them now. And they lend us up to 2.5 times EBITDA. And of course, after acquisition, what do? We really create an environment for these businesses to thrive, and we leave them a large degree of autonomy. So we need always a very good MD. We have robust financial controls, which some of these companies didn't have. And the game is reducing the debt and finding other acquisition and investing in there. And of course, you know, one problem we have, which is a growing problem because of the age of the company and the number of subsidiaries we have, is succession planning. Not only at the top of each company, but, you know, within the companies themselves. You know, in the early days, we never had anybody going or retiring, but it happens more and more, and this has to be managed.
So just one question, why no acquisitions in 2018?
Because there's none that we could implement at a price which was satisfactory to the vendor and to us, and which gave us the confidence that it was sustainable enough, really. In the outlook, I mean, we said was good. We've had a very good momentum since June 2016. We have good order book, we have good order intake in the beginning of the year, so we're happy with things that are going. We have, you know, we're happy with the board and the management team at this point, really. I think we've never had it so good. And we're really happy with the work which is being done within the companies, because in the early days we were relying mostly on deals, really, to get our growth. And we got the natural growth that I've explained, not looking for it. But, you know, the fact that, you know, Mark is now going into the companies trying to get the maximum out of what we already have is great. And it enables us to do well even in a year where we don't have deals. And, you know, okay, the political environment is, as we said, we've discussed currency, you know, I'm sure nobody's used the word Brexit, so I'll use it, you know. It's a little bit of uncertainty. I can't say I'm, you know, terribly worried either way. And I think it will finish. And when it finishes, you know, we will have probably a stronger sterling. I don't think it will go back to 170, which we had in 2014, which we suffered a bit. So yeah, we're happy with the way the outlook is at the present time. And of course, you know, just to repeat, what's the investment case we believe for Judges? The drivers, the robustness of the business model, based on these 3 pillars that we've explained, and the fact we're pursuing that business model with great discipline, large pool of targets, our focus on shareholder value, that's what we're looking for. I know, you know, we're good citizens. I think we treat people very well, etc. But the purpose of the company is to make money for its shareholders. It has no other purpose. We don't believe that our purpose is to change the world. We're a public company, and our purpose is to make money for shareholders. We have to be good citizens. We have to follow all the laws, and actually, it's good to be nice, you know. And we're nice to people who have businesses to sell. We're nice to our staff. We're very concerned about their well-being, but all that is not our purpose. Our purpose is to make money for shareholders. So profitability, cash generation, reducing debt, paying dividend, and producing a good return on capital. We believe that our shares are free of inheritance tax after 2 years. So we think that's very interesting, because we don't believe there's so many shares which qualify, which are palatable, so and pay a growing dividend. And we have good diversification and the dividend growth, which has been 25% since we started. And we think that's why people should buy our shares.
May I ask you, please, what's the outlook on acquisitions?
Well, it's terribly erratic. We always have a pipeline, and the question is, when do we bring one home? And we just can't discuss it because it's always exciting. It's always exciting because all the acquisitions are earnings enhancing, so we can't even hint. Maybe we have one tomorrow, and maybe we won't have one until December, or maybe next year. I hope we do one this year.
What's the health of the acquisition pipeline then compared to last year and the year before?
Well, last year we didn't have a fantastic acquisition pipeline. This is one of the reasons we didn't do any deal this year. Well, I'm to talk about 18 naturally, but in 17 we didn't have a fantastic pipeline. It goes up and down. We just can't comment on this.
For a typical company you buy, is there an advantage in being owned by judges? In the sense, does it enhance their credibility in the eyes of their customers?
I think, we have had a few MDs who've said that, and one of the guy who's kept a stake in it's an unusual thing. Usually we buy 100%, but he kept a stake in his company. He was quite young. He wanted to carry on working, and he said, yes, it's helping me because sometimes I have customers who really see that we're part of a bigger group, and it gives me more credibility. But I don't think it's terribly significant. What do you think?
I mean, I think there are two or three really huge benefits. I mean, first of all, most of these businesses are owner started and managed, and they're this person's baby. And what they don't want to do is to sell a business, and the day after the ink's dry, they get merged in with something else. All the signs come down, R&D goes to China, production goes to India, finance goes to Boston, and it becomes a sales office of some mega corporation. So we don't do that at all. We keep the name of the business. They don't have to change their stationery. They don't, so it's still their baby, and that's enormously attractive to these types of vendors. So that's one thing. The second thing I think is that most of the vendors running the business, it's a lonely job being an MD. I did it on and off for 10 or 15 years, and it's great to have an environment where there's 15 other MDs who are in the same position, and just once in a while you can phone up and talk about personnel issues or how difficult it is to hire engineers or just something. And so being in a sort of like-minded community with no secrets is also extremely attractive. Having the sort of operations network and the sales network where, again, the people that work for you can have that same interaction is great. And then the other thing is that we're a very well-funded business, and therefore capital expenditure is not a big issue. And I've talked to businesses recently. I enormously frustrated a business I was talking to that we didn't own, and they'd got a track record of 12 consecutive years of solid profit growth. And they'd gone to this company with 10 million sales, they'd gone to the bank to borrow £200,000 for a new machine, and the bank had said no. And yet this company was as solid as you could possibly see. Whereas with us, it's a phone call. And the other thing is that we're not some enormous organisation with layers of Oxford history graduates and things who you need to spend a week explaining what a CNC machine is to. We know these businesses. We know why you'd buy a CNC machine. We know why you want to expand, why you want to do this. So the capital investment case for us is really quick and really easy.
Mark and David and Brad, thank you very much indeed.
So we'll answer more questions in September.